Welcome to Worked Up. This is where we make sense of the wild ride that is working life. We tackle the experiences that bring out the best in us and occasionally the worst. You'll find practical advice you can actually use, helping you to start taking action on whatever's got you worked up about work. Welcome back to the Worked Up podcast. I'm Kim Loader. Today we're talking about how to answer common interview questions. Interviews can feel awkward at the best of times. You're wanting to sound confident, professional, likable, and experienced. So in this episode, I want to take a little bit of the pressure out of that for you. I work in insurance recruitment, so I spend a lot of time speaking with both candidates and employers, and I hear a lot of the same interview questions come up over and over again. So we're going to walk through some of the most common ones. We're going to explain what interviewers are usually trying to understand and give you examples of some answers. I want you to remember that interviewers are not expecting perfection. They're just really wanting to understand who you are, how you communicate, and find some commonality. So between the two of you, you can work out, is this actually going to be a good fit? So the first one is the classic tell me about yourself. Now, I have been guilty in the past of going into an interview and sort of going into my life story, which is really not the idea of this question. What the interviewers are really trying to understand is, who are you professionally, what are you good at, and why might you suit this role? The answer should mostly focus on your work experience and then maybe just sprinkle in a little bit of that personality stuff. So what you like doing on the weekends, what hobbies you might have, what interests you have. It doesn't have to be tied back to the role that you're going for. If it does, that's fine. So your answer might sound something like, well, I've worked in insurance for about 8 years, mostly in claims and client service. I really love roles where I'm dealing with people and solving problems. Over the years, I've learned that focusing on managing customer expectations and working with brokers is what that role is really all about. More recently, I've been looking for an opportunity where I can continue developing my skills in a role that has a bit more variety. I've been looking after retail products up until this point, and I'm quite interested in commercial, and that's why I've applied for this role. On the weekends, I like to spend my time with family, and I've recently gotten into running. So that answer works because it explains your experience, it gives a bit of a feel for personality and working style, it's relevant to the role, and it's a bit conversational rather than just listing off the things that someone could read on your CV. You want to keep it focused. You want to make sure that it's a short professional overview, not your entire life story like I've done in the past. Hopefully answering the question does help you to feel a little bit warmed up and ready to go into the rest of the interview. The second question that you might get asked is, why are you leaving your current role? Now, this one needs honesty but also diplomacy. If you've genuinely gotten to a certain point in your current role and you need to move on in order to get to the next level, that is an easier position to explain than if you're having a hard time or experiencing something negative and that being the reason that you're wanting to move on. So it's definitely tricky to answer honestly without sounding like you're bagging out your current employer, because that's the golden rule of what not to do. So in this situation, I would recommend that you've already thought about this before you go into the interview, of course, and that you acknowledge to yourself, what is the thing that you're trying to get away from? For example, if you feel that you're being micromanaged, instead of saying you don't want to be micromanaged, you say what you do want. So you turn it around and describe what it is that you're looking to move toward. In this instance, you might say, I'm looking for more autonomy. I'm pretty comfortable managing my current portfolio. I've got good relationships with my clients and underwriters, and I work best when I have accountability. This role sounds like it could be a good fit. You could also say, I've really valued my time there and I've learned a lot, but I'm ready for a role that gives me more opportunity to grow. I'm looking for something where I can build on my experience and take on a bit more responsibility. As much as you can, frame your answers in the positive. Be concise without being too short or too limited in what you say. You still need to give some context. You just don't want to go into a lot of detail, and you definitely want to avoid saying anything negative or speaking badly of somebody or of a company. So the third one is, what are your strengths? Start by really knowing what your strengths are. There are going to be things that you are naturally good at, that you just do with ease and that you enjoy. Whatever those things are, choose one or two that are very relevant to the role that you're going for and talk to that. You might say, One of my strengths is staying calm when things are busy or when clients are frustrated. I'm good at breaking down what needs to happen, communicating clearly, and keeping the process moving. And then you would give a quick example. You might say, we had a client whose premium had increased by 50%. They were understandably shocked. I took the time to walk them through the factors impacting the increase. I explained the market conditions and discussed the options available to them. By the end of the conversation, they could at least understand why the premium had gone up so much. They appreciated that I was transparent and calm and was genuinely trying to help them find the best outcome. All right, number 4. What are your weaknesses? This is where I really don't want you to say, I'm a perfectionist. That answer is so overused, it's lost all meaning. I've actually developed a bit of a bias unwittingly towards this one. If someone tells me they're a perfectionist, I'm probably going to ask a lot of follow-up questions to understand, well, how does that play out? What does it mean to be a perfectionist? Where does that trip you up? And the reason that I'm doing that is I have heard that answer so many times. I feel like it's a bit of a throwaway line, and sometimes people think that that's a way of giving an answer without really giving an answer. You're wanting to be honest here and be real with yourself. You're not going to send yourself into an interview where the core requirement of that role is something that is your true weakness. And if that's the case, we've got other questions to ask. So this is where you would say, all right, let's have a look at some of the things that I've struggled with and where I've learnt from those struggles in the past, and go into your interview with those things in mind so you can talk to them. An example here might be saying something along the lines of, earlier in my career, I often found it hard to ask for help because I wanted to figure things out for myself. I've improved that by checking in earlier, especially when something could affect a client, deadline, or a decision. In answering like this, you've been able to show self-awareness and improvement, and that's what they're looking for. The 5th and last common interview question for today is, tell me about a time you dealt with a difficult client or stakeholder. Sometimes you might get asked, tell me about a time you dealt with a difficult coworker. I think it's helpful to use a bit of a structure when you answer these ones, so you can use situation, action, and result. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're an underwriter. You might say, I had a situation where a broker needed an urgent decision on a risk, but the submission was missing a bit of detail. There was extra pressure because it was getting really close to renewal. So rather than just sending back an email and asking for more information, I just picked up the phone, explained what it was that I needed and why it really mattered from an underwriting perspective. And once we both understood what the concerns were, we were able to work pretty quickly to piecing those missing details together and quickly get to an end result. Now, in your example, you're going to put a little bit more detail in there. You might say the type of client, you might say exactly what it was that was missing, or the specific questions that you asked in the initial stages. In answering this way, the situation, the action, and the result, the interviewer can see the context of what it is that you're explaining. They can put themselves in your shoes, meaning they can probably imagine a very similar situation that they've also been in, and therefore they can get a good sense of the appropriateness of that action that you took. They might be thinking to themselves, good, I would have done the same thing. Or that shows communication, it shows judgment, it shows respect for the underwriting and broking relationship. It shows a commitment to building the portfolio or respecting the underwriting guidelines whilst also respecting the commercial relationship. Every situation, of course, is going to have its own context. That's it. Those were the 5 common interview questions and how to answer them. To recap and some further thoughts. You'll feel more confident going into an interview if you've spent a bit of time thinking generally about how you might answer some of these questions. It's best not to try and memorize perfect answers, but instead think about the key messages that you want to get across. Remind yourself to keep your answers honest, relevant, specific, and professional, and have some examples ready to go. If you think about the things that you've achieved, that you're proud of, or that you've learnt from, those are a good starting point. We'll do another one with more common interview questions in a future episode. I'm forecasting some gems such as, where do you see yourself in 5 years? For now, good luck in your next interview. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at hello@able, ABLE, recruitment.com.au. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you next time.